knocking out another of the 8-bit Sonic games with the final mainline platformer of the Game Gear, Sonic Blast. This one I never really played a lot of. I played it on collection discs and as an unlockable on Sonic Adventure DX, but never stayed on it for long. It has the novelty of being the only 8-bit platformer with Knuckles playable, and for trying to ape the pre-rendered look of Donkey Kong Country on the Game Gear of all systems. The plot is one of the simplest yet. Eggman has broken a Chaos Emerald into 5 pieces with a laser, intending to hit Sonic. Sonic and Knuckles go tracking those pieces and also aim to smash up his newest base. I will say that breaking up a single Chaos Emerald is at least a clever way to explain why there's only 5 to get, instead of having the inconsistent emerald count going unexplained throughout the entire 8-bit series. As usual with multiple characters, I'll alternate character footage by zones. But I'll mix things up. Since there are an odd number of zones and this is Knuckles' only 8-bit playable role, I'll start with him so he gets the most screen time in the video instead of Sonic. Green Hill Zone is first, making its 4th appearance in this 5-game sub-series, seeming to have recovered from being mechanised in Sonic Chaos. Knuckles is Knuckles here. He's got the glide, climbing and the spin dash. The big issue with this game is that you're not very fast, and you're quite big on such a small screen, making it easy to ram your face into any hazard. You're even more painfully slow underwater, but here I want to go in the first bit I can see so I can break through this wall to find the ring to a special zone. Here I run towards the screen while needing to collect rings. They put a few tricky springs that would make you fly over the rings behind it, and speed boosts that can make it easy to miss rings if you have to move to the side, but you can just jump over them. And there's a few that require jumping, and the depth perception with those isn't actually that bad. They're all easy to get the right amount of rings for, but this is an Act 1, so I only get an extra life and an emerald piece. I then have to start Act 1 from the start. We get some returning Sonic 2 enemies here, Buzzer and Coconuts. There's also a spinning spiky bridge. In this game, being hit only loses you 10 rings instead of all of them. That's about it, Act 1 is incredibly short. Act 2 has me running down a hill and taking on my first returning Masher before I spin down this pipe. Once I'm out, I climb the wall for an extra life and glide over the entire area. I drop down this loop with the gap in the ground and then jump the next gap to continue along this higher route, across a spinning spiked log to reach the Act 2 special zone. It wants 50 rings, and since I already explained how these work, I can skip to the end, showing I have 64 rings and the first piece of the Chaos Emerald. And unlike with Act 1, I'm not placed at the start, but at the start of the fork leading to the special zone so I can take the other path. I continue along until I'm dropped in water, but with Knuckles climbing and gliding, I can get out and keep myself above water until I land back in right at the end of it and can safely climb back out. Past that is the signpost. And now for Act 3. It's a very straightforward run to the right while collecting rings until I'm dropped in front of the boss. It's Eggman in a little helicopter pod firing a boomerang. I jump over them and glide into his windscreen. After a few hits he boosts forward and changes the direction he's facing. It doesn't change anything and 6 hits defeat him. It's hard to have any thoughts on this game's incarnation of Green Hill Zone because the acts are so short that they leave no impression. The pipes in Act 2 are new to this zone, but they don't mean anything interesting. And now to Sonic 4 Yellow Desert Zone Act 1. Sonic does have something new in this game, a double jump. It lets him reach high places without the need for gliding and climbing, it's just a bit trickier. The first section of the level has me skip most of it by jumping over the trees until I'm dropped into a large hole. Further on is a pipe I can ride down, and when it drops me out, I can double jump to the right to find this Act Special Zone. Of course, it's just an extra life. Next time I run past the pipe and the goal is right there. Act 2 has me inside a pyramid. Pyramid, you fucking dick. Act 2 has me inside a pyramid. I run up a few ramps and get hit by my first Sandoom, an enemy that only appears in this game. The Batbots from Sonic 3 also return here, and that's before I jump myself into a spiked ceiling. Down a sandfall and double jumping across the next area until I drop down and get to the important part. These weird craters in the wall will send you flying in a set pattern depending on which one you land in. This specific route takes me to the special zone. Still 50 rings, but they're more spread out and some require the use of a spring to get all the rings in a certain sequence. Still an easy one, and I get it with 61 rings. But if these are all the pieces of a single Chaos Emerald, why are they all different colours too? You may also notice that all of the game's zones are called Colour Location, and the emerald piece you get in that zone is the same colour as the zone's name. This time the Act 2 special zone makes me repeat the entire stage. The exit is just past the crater maze, most routes will send you there eventually. Now for Act 3. It's quite unusual for a Sonic game to start you off moving left. I just have to drop down several pits, building up rings until I reach the boss at the bottom. Here we have Journey to the West Eggman, complete with the Jindo Yun and Rui Bang. He'll fly across the screen and try poking at you, while you have to once again hit his windscreen. I'd say this one is easier to defeat than the first boss, but takes more hits at 12. Yellow Desert has the same issue that Green Hill Zone has, in that it's over before you know it, before any of it becomes memorable. Back to Knuckles for Red Volcano Zone Act 1. Run down a hill and, in my case, fail to avoid landing in the lava at the bottom while another Sonic 2 enemy, Rexon, emerges from it. Along with them are the new spring robots which can be used to bounce up to higher platforms. Up here is my first shield in the monitor before I drop down to the right and speed right past the platforms you can ride across lava. Then comes the lava fall with Mega Man-esque disappearing platforms. But they're so small and you're so slippery for them that I end up ignoring them and take the damage to the other side. Past that is the goal. Act 2 now, which starts with another ride over lava and another returning Sonic 2 enemy, Gola. I take the first spring robot to its hidden high route filled with steam and then drop down on top of one of the loops. I run all the way to the right to drop down to a huge downward slope. I jump off the one I started on onto the one going the opposite direction, go up that one and jump to the right to find a platform with the special zone ring. This one is all based around either your jump timing, avoiding the speed boost and getting the springs. I need 50 rings still and I manage exactly 50 for the third emerald piece. Back to the slopes, which I run down to the bottom and through the hole to reach this lift requiring charging a spin dash to move up. I drop down the next hole, finally use this pump right to ride over the lava to the end. I ignore the next lift and climb up instead before dropping down and moving right. Through a loop, over more lava, past some steam and over even more lava to reach the goal. And now for Act 3. Here I have a maze filled with rings to climb up using the spin dash lifts. At the top is a platform that takes me into the void where the next Eggman battle takes place. This one uses a spring to bounce up from below and swing its weird balls 3D arm at me. Once again I have to hit the windscreen when he comes up. This is a genuine challenge getting the aim right, as the hand rests right above the head. Standing at the complete opposite side of the screen and jumping will guarantee a dodge of that hand at least. It takes 8 hits and I actually get hit enough to die first time, but I get it next. The most damning thing I can say about this game is that Red Volcano is probably the game's best zone. The levels are an okay length and don't end during your first blink like the first two, and I hate the next two, so it just kind of wins by default. Speaking of, back to Sonic for Blue Marine Zone Act 1. I think the pain in the ass this zone is can be shown by the opening few seconds of footage, where within seconds I'm in water moving at a snail's pace and just trying to jump out is awkward as hell to pull off. Crab Meeks make their first appearance after Sonic 1 here. I manage to get out and jump along the top floor, breaking through a wall, but he stops at this extra life not far in, so I have to go underwater. Then comes the other hard part, the invisible currents that drag you off that you just have to know are there. It drops me in front of a pipe that spits me out at some tiny platforms where it is very easy to go slightly too far to the left and get caught in that same current again. This time I go all the way left and jump into a pipe that puts me back out into the same area, just slightly further right. So next I try a pipe in the ceiling right of that one, but that just puts me back at the wall I broke at the start. So I try the tiny platforms, but drop a pixel too far down and get dragged by a current into the pipe below that spits me back out into the same current I first got caught in. It takes a few minutes before I get that split second timing again once I jump out of the pipe. But these platforms are so tiny they're a nightmare to land on, so I miss and get dragged into the current loop again. And don't you dare instinctively jump when you land on a platform to fight against your momentum skidding you off the edge, otherwise you're caught in the current again. 4 minutes spent in the level and I finally complete the first proper bit of platforming and cross the platforms to this pipe. It spits me out into these ruins where I move forward for a bit until the current drags me straight up and around these platforms into the Act 1 special zone. But I don't want that one anyway. It dumps me on a spring that sends me back the way I came. There's this octopus that only appears in this game as I decide to try climbing the ruins. Now that's straightforward for a bit. The Aquis from Oil Ocean Zone in Sonic 2 shows up here. Sonic's double jump makes this bit easy enough and I get out just as the drowning counter starts to find the level's goal. I get Super Sonic on the signpost. Don't get excited, that's his only appearance in this game. Now, that was annoying, but Act 2 is worse. And I'm not even talking about dying in the first few seconds because the collapsing bridge surprised me and drops me on a crab meat. This time I jump down into the water and see that air bubbles now appear in this act. Just never when you actually need them. And the currents return. You could stand there at a bubble spot and wait out your entire time before drowning and a bubble could just refuse to appear. As is what happens when I descend further down, reach a spot where they appear, don't get one, and drown just as one does. Next time I keep going further down as fast as I can, through another bridge and another to the left of that one. This time a bubble appears, but it still takes over half the timer. I make the mistake of dropping a few centimetres instead of landing on the tiny platform and get caught in another current that drags me to a pipe that sends me a decent distance back. Next time I try the right bridge, but it drops me back into that same current again. Next time I land on a platform and make that jump. It takes me to a pipe that drops me into another current that forces me to the bottom of this area past all the platforms. So I try climbing, but can't find a way further up or any bubbles, so I drown again. The bubbles appear in the spot the current dropped me off, and you can just barely jump on this first platform if you get your positioning and timing right so the current doesn't drag you back down. A lot of the jumps in this climb you only barely make and look like you shouldn't be able to. I reach the top, drop down to the right and hold against the wall to go through it, leading to a switch, but I drown seconds later. The switch opens the doors that have been dotted around the area, allowing me to reach the special zone. If I didn't drown right in front of it, that is. I get it next time though. Another 50 rings to get, nothing new in this one. I finish it with 51. Just one piece of the emerald left. I climb to the top of the level again and keep jumping right, running through a wall to find a maze of pipes. I take the bottom pipe, the bottom one again, and the only one that leads to be dumped into a current taking me all the way to the bottom of this next area. Of all the levels to go on forever, why did they choose the terrible water level? I go all the way left and into a pipe that sends me a good distance upwards. As I reach the top, I get caught in that same current again. I get back and climb up to the platforms above without touching the current. I spin dash through a wall and drop down to hit the next switch. Very kind of the game to have the only spring that takes me back up bounce me into an octopus. Much appreciated. Almost lose my mind watching the counter go down from 9 until the bubble finally shows up at 2. Then I climb these platforms higher until I finally get out of the water. After so long in there, that slow speed I complained about at the start looks insane in comparison now. Level still isn't done. I wonder how much of the video is going to be taken up by this one act. I have some pipes to navigate through, but the second one is a dick. It splits you right into another pipe that sends you back to the start of this section. You have to know to jump as soon as you get out to finally reach the end of the level. My only thought at this point was about how I was going to have to do all that again as Knuckles. But I still have Act 3 to deal with. This time I'm building up rings while running across collapsing bridges and riding pipes up to the next level. Until a pipe dumps me in water and I have to descend a few levels before a current drags me to Eggman. He zooms back and forth in a submarine, stopping to fire a single harpoon while I have to smash in his windshield again. 8 hits to kill and there are no bubbles here, so I have to do it quick. But of course I drown first time. And the second time, and the third. I get him on the fourth though. When I wanted longer zones, this is not what I meant. That was a miserable experience and contender for worst water zone in the series. I spent far more time in this zone alone than it took me to get to it in the first place. But now back to Knuckles for the final zone, Silver Castle Zone. This one is almost just as bad. Act 1 drops me on a set of platforms I have to stand on to rotate to fill up this meter to activate teleporters. The level is a big maze, and the real reason I set up the character order like this was so I didn't have to untangle the 40 minutes I got stuck here as Sonic. I take the middle right path, facing the Egg Saucer, another one-off enemy, until I drop through a hole leading to the also exclusive to this game, Egg Sentry. I move left here, jump in the gaps and drop down the one at the end to land in front of a teleporter. Do not take it. Move left some more through the wall to another teleporter and take that one. Then the one it leads to. I drop down to the right and another one-shot enemy, Egg Pogo, bounces around here. I drop down all the way to the right and take the teleporter there, and then one all the way to the left in the upper corner, avoiding any springs that may want to take me to the wrong teleporter. I take the one below the teleporter it sends me to, then go through the hole below that. That gets me chased by a spiked wall. I spin dash to the end to deal with all the enemies trying to slow me down until I reach another teleporter at the end. After that it's running right a little more to reach the end of the act. If I used the Sonic run, that would have taken 4 or 5 times the length due to me getting lost. As for Act 2, I run into an enemy right away and die. Next time I don't do that, and break this wall to fail to get through this electric hallway unharmed. When a gap in the floor appears, I stick to the upper route, jumping past electric floors and spikes until I get to the drop at the end. I hold right to land on a collapsing bridge and jump up to a teleporter, then jump the gap to another, glide through the spikes and reach the final special zone ring. This one is slightly harder in that the stage moves faster and the groups of rings are more spaced out, but I still finish it with 3 more rings than needed and have all 5 pieces of the Chaos Emerald. Shame it makes me start the entire level again. This time I drop down that first gap and continue right across an electric floor with a spiked ceiling. I get dropped in front of another spiked wall I have to outrun to reach another teleporter at the end. I keep moving left here, dealing with more electric floors until I get dropped in front of a second spike wall moving right. That then drops me in front of a third moving left until I reach the next teleporter. I have another rotary platform switch to activate so I can continue to another one surrounded by spikes. This turns on the teleporter leading to another spiked wall that leads to one last drop leading to the end of the level. Honestly, Silver Castle wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for Act 1's horrible teleporter maze. Act 2 is a perfectly okay final level. Act 3 has a straightforward set of teleporters to take while gathering rings on the way. Once I've passed through them all, one more opens up near the start leading to the boss. I'm on this wheel that controls the location of the mirror above me. Eggman charges a laser and I have to get the mirror under it to reflect it back at him. If you miss, you have to avoid the laser yourself. After about 8 hits, he'll try faking you out by switching which side he's aiming with mid-charge, but it's still easy and he takes 13 hits to defeat. The whole arena explodes and leads to the final boss. Eggman appears on the monitor of this egg-shaped machine. This is a genuinely tough boss, so the game gives you 99 rings to survive on. It splits in two, with the bottom acting as a platform and the top growing drill horns. It also moves side to side dropping laser balls, and it can only be damaged by landing dead centre on top of the head. This is easier as Sonic since you have a double jump to get over those horns safer, but Knuckles doesn't have that. This takes 4 attempts to complete. After 6 hits, the bottom segment will move side to side as well. This might actually make it easier as Knuckles at least. With the bottom on one side of the screen and the top towards the other, it gives me more safe space to jump around than it does being in the middle. In the end, it takes a total of 12 hits to defeat. Turns out Silver Castle was a Death Egg clone and it sinks into the sea. If you got all the emerald pieces, your character will juggle them. There's your ending. Sonic Blast is definitely the weakest side-scrolling Sonic game I've played. Just for context, I have not yet played Superstars, Sonic 4 Episode 2, Pocket Adventure, DS Colors, Advance 2 or any mobile games, Gamecom Sonic Jam or the GBA Sonic 1 part, so those are not counted in that statement. It may also be a contender for the worst of the Game Gear and Master System set. There's at least one other that could take that spot for me, and no, it's not Sonic Labyrinth. It's one okay zone, 2 forgettable zones that barely exist, one that would be okay but is dragged down by a bad half, and one of the worst zones in the series. The huge pre-rendered sprites cripple the game because you can't be allowed to move too fast or else you'll make the already bad screen crunch even worse. The game has very little memorable about it, and what is all the bad stuff. I'm far from one of those people desperate to find any chance to say how they think most Sonic games are bad actually, and I'm even probably more positive on the Game Gear Master System games than most. But this one's just a bit crap.